Look closely at this CCTV footage. A young woman in a black dress walks hand in hand with a man through the lobby of an Auckland hotel. She's smiling, animated, celebrating her 22nd birthday. She has no idea these are her final hours of life. If you're here, you know the truth is often darker than fiction. Subscribe now and never miss a case. This is a story of loss, courage, and justice. Take a moment, brace yourself, and let's dive in. Every detail we uncover brings us closer to the truth. Stay focused, stay with me, and let the facts speak for themselves. If this is your first time hearing a case like this, I'm glad you chose to listen. Hit the subscribe button and stay updated for more gripping cases. Let's begin. 48 hours. Her father will fly halfway around the world to search for her. In 8 days, New Zealand will stop breathing as police announce what they've found. This is the story of Grace Millane, a traveler who came to New Zealand seeking adventure, and the man who made sure she'd never leave. Grace Millane was not supposed to die in Auckland. The 22-year-old from Wickford, Essex, was 6 weeks into the adventure of a lifetime. After graduating from the University of Lincoln with a degree in marketing, Grace had done what thousands of young British graduates do each year. She bought a round-the-world ticket and set off to find herself. Her itinerary was carefully planned. Peru, then New Zealand, then on to Asia. She documented everything. Instagram posts from Machu Picchu, WhatsApp messages to her mother describing the landscapes, daily updates to her family group chat. Grace was the youngest of 3 children in a close-knit family. Her father, David, described her as confident, outgoing, and a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Her friends knew her as adventurous but sensible, the type who'd go skydiving, but would text her mom the moment she landed. She had been traveling alone, but never felt alone. She stayed in hostels, made friends easily, and kept in constant contact with home. Her parents tracked her journey with a mixture of pride and the standard parental worry. On November 20th, 2018, Grace arrived in New Zealand. For the next 2 weeks, she moved through the country's backpacker trail, Wellington, then Auckland. She was having the time of her life. Her Instagram stories showed bungee jumping, wine tasting, exploring. But beneath the surface of New Zealand's scenic beauty, Grace's path was about to intersect with a predator who had been waiting. December 1st, 2018. Grace Millane's 22nd birthday. She woke up in Base Backpackers Hostel in Auckland's city center, surrounded by other travelers. She spent the morning messaging family back in the UK, where they were 13 hours behind. Her mother sent birthday wishes. Her father promised to call later. But Grace had made other plans for her evening. In the days before her birthday, she'd been active on Tinder, a common practice for solo travelers looking to meet locals or other visitors. She'd matched with several people, but one conversation had progressed further than the others. A man named Jesse, 27 years old. His profile showed a clean-cut guy with an easy smile. They'd been messaging for several days. He suggested meeting for drinks on her birthday. Grace agreed. At 5 p.m., Grace left Base Backpackers wearing a black dress and white sneakers. Security cameras captured her walking out with confidence, her small black handbag over her shoulder. She had no idea she would never return to collect her belongings. At 6 p.m., Grace met Jesse Kempson for the first time outside the Sky City precinct in downtown Auckland. Surveillance footage shows them greeting each other, awkward at first, then warming up. They went to the Mexican cafe on Victoria Street. They shared nachos and several cocktails. The bartender would later remember them as a typical Tinder date. Lots of talking, some laughter, the man doing most of the talking. At 7 p.m., they moved to a few different bars, Revelry, then the Bluestone Room. More drinks, more conversation. Witnesses recalled seeing them kiss. Grace sent her last message to a friend at 8 p.m. "I click with him so well. He's the most interesting guy I've met traveling." At 9:12 p.m., CCTV captured Grace and Jesse entering the City Life Hotel on Queen Street. They took the elevator to his apartment on the 3rd floor. Grace Millane was never seen alive again. December 2nd, 2018, 7 a.m. UK time. David Millane tried to call his daughter to wish her a happy birthday directly. The call went straight to voicemail. Odd, but not alarming. Time zones could be confusing, and Grace often had spotty reception. He tried again that evening. Voicemail. December 3rd, Still no response. This was not like Grace. Even when she was in remote locations, she found Wi-Fi. She always checked in. Always. David tried Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp. He contacted Grace's friends. No one had heard from her since her birthday. On December 5th, 4 days after Grace vanished, David Millane reported his daughter missing to local police in the UK, who immediately contacted New Zealand authorities. At base backpackers, Grace's belongings sat untouched in her locker. Her bed was still made from December 1st. Staff confirmed she had not returned. Auckland police treated it as a standard missing persons case at first, but something felt wrong immediately. This was a young woman who had been in constant communication with family for weeks, who had a flight booked to go elsewhere, who had left her passport and luggage behind. Detectives obtained access to Grace's phone records and social media. They discovered her Tinder account and began contacting her recent matches. One stood out. A man named Jesse had been messaging Grace extensively. Their last exchange was on December 1st, the day she disappeared. On December 6th, Detective Inspector Scott Beard made a public appeal for information. He specifically asked for the man Grace had been on a Tinder date with to come forward. Later that day, Jesse Kimpson walked into Auckland Central Police Station. He seemed helpful, concerned even. He told investigators he'd been on a date with Grace on her birthday. They'd had drinks, kissed, but then parted ways around 8 p.m. after things didn't click romantically. He said Grace was alive when he left her near the Sky City area. He claimed he went home alone. But detectives had already obtained something Jesse didn't know about: CCTV footage from dozens of cameras throughout Auckland's CBD. And the footage told a completely different story. The surveillance footage was damning. While Jesse claimed he and Grace had parted ways at 8 p.m., the CCTV showed them entering the City Life Hotel together at 9:12 p.m. They were kissing in the elevator. They went to Jesse's apartment. Grace never came back out. But Jesse did. At 8 a.m. on December 2nd, the morning after Grace's birthday, cameras captured Jesse Kimpson leaving his building. He walked to a shop and purchased a suitcase. A large, wheeled suitcase. He returned to his apartment. At 9 a.m., he conducted multiple Google searches on his phone. Waitakere Ranges, a remote forest area. Hottest fire. Large bags near me. He left his apartment again at 12:30 p.m., this time wheeling the newly purchased suitcase. The way he moved suggested the case was now very heavy. He rented a car, a silver Ford hatchback. Surveillance cameras tracked the vehicle traveling west out of Auckland, toward the Waitakere Ranges, a densely forested area 30 minutes from the city. Jesse returned to the city at 6 p.m. The suitcase was no longer with him. But he wasn't done. Over the next 24 hours, CCTV captured Jesse, cleaning his apartment thoroughly, taking multiple bags of trash to different dumpsters across the city, using Grace's credit card to purchase drinks at a bar, going on another Tinder date, bringing a different woman back to the same apartment where Grace had died. When detectives confronted Jesse with this evidence on December 7th, his story fell apart immediately. He was arrested and charged with murder. But Grace's body had not been found. David Millane, who had flown to Auckland, made an emotional plea. Grace is not just a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Grace is so much more than that. The search for Grace Millane became a national mission. December 9th, 2018. Over 100 police officers, searchers, and volunteers combed through the Waitakere Ranges. The terrain was unforgiving, dense native bush, steep ravines, areas accessible only on foot. They were searching for a large suitcase containing the body of a 22-year-old woman somewhere in 16,000 hectares of wilderness. The pressure was immense. Every hour that passed without finding Grace was another hour her family endured unimaginable agony. David Millane stayed in Auckland, waiting. Investigators analyzed Jesse's phone data to pinpoint which areas of the Waitakere Ranges he had driven to. Cell tower pings placed his rental car on Scenic Drive, a winding road through the forest, for approximately 90 minutes on December 2nd. Search teams focused on that area, looking for recently disturbed earth, tire tracks, anything unusual. On the afternoon of December 9th, 8 days after Grace's birthday, a search dog alerted to an area about 10 meters from the roadside, hidden in thick bush. Officers moved carefully toward the location. There, partially covered with dirt and leaves, was a large suitcase. Detective Inspector Scott Beard was the one who opened it. Inside, they found Grace Millane. She was in a fetal position, her body showing signs of compression injuries consistent with being forced into the confined space. The search was over. David Millane was informed immediately. He released a statement. Grace was a beautiful, talented, loving daughter. Grace was our sunshine, and she will be missed forever. New Zealand mourned with him. Thousands of people placed flowers at a memorial in central Auckland. The country felt a collective shame that a visitor, a guest, had been murdered. Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern made a public apology to Grace's family. Your daughter should have been safe here. She wasn't. And I'm sorry for that. Jesse Kempson's trial began on November 4, 2019, at the Auckland High Court. He pleaded not guilty to murder. His defense didn't deny that Grace had died in his apartment. Instead, they argued it was an accident during consensual sexual activity involving choking. They claimed Grace had died accidentally, and that Jesse had panicked. But the prosecution painted a very different picture, one supported by a mountain of evidence. The Google searches. The jury heard that between the time Grace died, estimated around midnight on December 1st, and when Jesse purchased the suitcase the next morning, he had conducted very specific Google searches. Waitakere Ranges. Hottest fire. Large bags near me. The Zodiac Killer. There are signs of death by strangulation. These weren't the searches of someone who had experienced a tragic accident. These were the searches of someone planning a cover-up. The behavior. The timeline of Jesse's actions was presented in excruciating detail. He took multiple photos of Grace's body. He watched pornography while her body was still in his room. He went on another Tinder date the next evening. He used Grace's credit card. He thoroughly cleaned his apartment. He disposed of evidence across multiple locations. He never called for help. The lies. When Jesse first spoke to police, he claimed he and Grace had parted ways around 8 p.m. When confronted with CCTV showing them entering his hotel together, he changed his story. At trial, he claimed Grace's death was accidental. But he couldn't explain the Google searches, the suitcase, the photos, or why he never sought medical help. The evidence. Forensic pathologist Dr. Simon Stables testified that Grace's injuries, bruising around her neck, hemorrhaging in her eyes, were consistent with sustained pressure, not accidental death during consensual activity. Digital forensics showed that Grace's phone stopped all activity at 1 a.m. on December 2nd. It was never turned back on. The prosecution argued that Jesse Kempson strangled Grace Millane, took photos of her body, researched how to dispose of her, purchased a suitcase, drove her body to a remote forest, and buried her, then went about his life as if nothing had happened. The verdict. On November 22, 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. Guilty of murder. Grace's family, who had sat through every painful day of the trial, wept with relief. David Millane held his head in his hands. Jesse Kempson showed no emotion. At sentencing in February 2020, Justice Simon Moore said, Grace Millane was in the early stages of a life full of promise. You have taken all of that away. Your actions were a complete violation of her dignity. Jesse Kempson was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. But the sentence couldn't answer the question Grace's family would always ask. Why? The impact of Grace's murder rippled far beyond the courtroom. For the Millane family, David Millane gave a victim impact statement that captured the unbearable weight of loss. Grace was taken in the most brutal fashion a year ago, and our lives have been ripped apart. This will be with us forever. Grace was our sunshine, and she will be missed forever. Grace's mother, Jillian, and her brothers, Declan and Michael, have maintained privacy in their grief, but the family established the Grace Millane Fund to support women's safety initiatives. For New Zealand, the case sparked a national reckoning about violence against women. The hashtag #HerLightOurLove trended as New Zealanders grappled with the fact that a visitor had been murdered in what is often considered one of the world's safest countries. A review of hotel security protocols was initiated. Questions were raised about how much hotels monitor who enters and exits their properties. For solo travelers, the case sent shockwaves through the backpacker community. Grace had done everything right. She'd told friends where she was going. She'd met someone in a public place. She'd stayed in populated areas. The randomness of her murder was what made it so terrifying. It could have been anyone. Safety organizations updated their guidance for solo travelers, particularly women using dating apps abroad. The conversation shifted from "women should be more careful" to "why are women being murdered on dates?" The digital footprint. The case also highlighted how completely our digital lives can be reconstructed. Every message, every swipe, every CCTV frame. It all told the story when Grace couldn't. Her Tinder messages, her Google location history, her final Instagram post from the day before her birthday, a photo of a sunset with the caption, "The sunsets here are insane." It was a tragically prophetic image, a beautiful moment before darkness fell. Jesse Kempson's other victims. After his conviction, other women came forward with stories about Jesse. A previous girlfriend obtained a protection order against him. Another woman reported a disturbing encounter. The pattern suggested Grace wasn't the first woman he'd harmed. She was the first he'd killed. In 2022, Jesse was convicted of additional charges related to violence against a former partner. The sentence was added to his existing life imprisonment. In December 2019, 1 year after her death, Grace Millane's ashes were scattered at her favorite beach in Essex. Her family held a private ceremony, playing her favorite music, sharing her favorite memories, trying to remember Grace for the 22 years she lived, not just how she died. But they also wanted to ensure her death meant something. The Grace Millane Trust was established to fund education programs about coercive control, relationship violence, and women's safety. Schools across the UK now include Grace's story in their curriculum about recognizing dangerous relationships. In New Zealand, December 1st has become an unofficial day of remembrance, not just for Grace, but for all victims of gender-based violence. A plaque was installed at Scenic Drive in the Waitakere Ranges, not at the site where she was found, but at a lookout point her family chose. It reads simply, "Grace Millane, a loved daughter, a loved sister, a loved friend, forever in our hearts." Her father, David, said in an interview years later, "Grace was adventurous. She was kind. She trusted people. Those shouldn't be the qualities that get you killed. We want her remembered for who she was, not just what happened to her." Grace Millane traveled 11,000 miles to see the world. She deserved to come home. Final frame. Grace's photo from her university graduation, smiling, full of life and possibility. If you or someone you know is experiencing relationship violence, please reach out. UK, National Domestic Abuse Helpline, 0808 2247. NZ, Women's Refuge Crisis Line, 0800 733 843. International, find resources at appropriate organization. Grace's story matters. Share it. Remember her name. And if this story moved you, please subscribe. Every week, I cover cases that need to be told, for the victims, for their families, and for the change we need to make. Let me know in the comments. How do we make solo travel safer? What needs to change? Rest in peace, Grace. Dove.